Next up, we got Babe Ruth. Or should I call him Baby Ruth? You know what I'm saying? American sports icon. Now, Baby Ruth, like I said, sports icon. You know what I'm saying? Also, too, I told y'all that we will be doing more of these, trying to, player reactions. Trying to understand MLB a little bit better because I am a noob. Now, y'all can let me know in the comments what players y'all want me to react to. I know some of these players, it's like, I feel like, tell me if this is true. Some of these players are great players, but I don't think a lot of people still, like, care about them. I don't know. Let me know. Like, do people still care about Babe Ruth? Do they still do? I don't know, bro. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Let me know in the comments, though. But yeah. So we got a new channel. My boy, Biographics. Y'all go subscribe. First time checking this video out. So, hey, let's check out who Babe Ruth is. Yeah. Hit the like button, hit that sub button. Let's just hop into it.
Rarely, very rarely, an athlete comes along that transcends the sports pages and becomes an international icon. They're so good, they become permanently associated with that sport, like Michael Jordan in basketball and Wayne Gretzky in hockey. So famous that even if you know nothing about the sport itself, you know their names.
And that's what I've been saying too. Is a lot of players I know, I just heard of their names over the years, but I don't know who they are. I have zero knowledge on who they are, but I just know their name. Like, I'm pretty sure every person watching this, I bet you know who Michael Jordan is. I bet you know who Michael Jackson is. Okay? Now it's a whole different lane, but the rules still apply. Every single person know who Michael Jackson is, bro. Every single one. Kids, all the way to old folks. Everybody know. You know what I'm saying? So,
we call these athletes superstars, and there is perhaps no better example of a sports superstar than Babe Ruth. Everyone knows who Babe Ruth is. We are almost a century on from his accomplishments on the baseball diamond, and we are still talking about what he did. That staying power that few sports figures can match. He was so good at baseball that the game itself changed to better suit his play style, and has never gone back to the way it was before he came along. Everybody loved him, even when he got into trouble, which he did frequently. The problem with Babe Ruth is that there are so many myths and legends around him that they get confused with the facts. And this happens to the point that at times it's difficult to pin down who he was or to quantify how important he was to the game of baseball in American history. Sure, everyone knows who Babe Ruth was, but do they actually? The story of Babe Ruth is a baseball story, sure, but it's also a human story, and those are always the hardest ones to tease out of the pages of history and legend.
alright.
For most of his life, George Herman Ruth Jr. thought he'd been born on February the 7th, 1894. That was what his parents had told him.
Okay,
After all, it wasn't actually on February the 7th, 1890.
Dang, that's how you know it's older, because like I about to say, because how do you not know your birthday? But I forgot. You gotta think about too, like back in the day, they probably didn't even have birth certificates. It wasn't like stamped on when you was born. Like you just was born, motherfucker. You was born. I don't know when, but you was born, motherfucker. You here right now, ain't you? You know what I'm saying? So it makes sense. That's crazy.
For most of his life, George Herman Ruth Jr. thought he'd been born on February the 7th, 1894. That was what his parents had told him, after all. It wasn't actually until later in life when he applied for a passport that he discovered that his birth certificate said that he'd been born on February the 6th, 1895. Like many things about the Ruth legends, no one is really sure for the reason in this discrepancy. He was born in Baltimore, Maryland, in a tough working-class neighborhood on the waterfront. His father ran a saloon, and apparently had little time to raise a son who ran wild in the streets and became a delinquent. At the age of 7, he was sent to St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys, a combination reform school and orphanage run by the Xaverian Brothers, a Catholic religious order. It was a grim place to grow up with conditions similar to a prison. Ruth would spend over a decade there. The brothers at St. Mary's, like many such institutions, encouraged their charges to participate in athletics, believing it would keep them in good health and cut down on the amount of trouble they got into. The most popular sport played at the school was baseball. This is hardly surprising. Baseball had become the most popular sport in America over the last 20 years. Everyone played, from schoolboys all the way up to the major leagues, which had contested the first World Series in 1903. Ruth loved baseball, and it soon became apparent that he was good at it too. At St Mary's, he usually played on a team of boys several years older than he was, and by the time he was 16, he was the school's best player. He became a pitcher, the player responsible for throwing the ball to opposing hitters to try and get them out, and he was so talented that Jack Dunn, the owner of the minor league Baltimore Oracles, signed him to a professional contract in January 1914 at the age of either 19 or 20, depending on which date of birth you use. Finally released from the walls of St Mary's, the young Ruth wanted to see everything. He wanted to do everything, experience everything all at once. He was naive about the world in a way that charmed his teammates, who soon gave him the nickname Babe because he looked and acted like a big kid. The nickname stuck, and for the rest of his life, hardly...
Are you serious? That's not his real name? Baby Ruth isn't even his real name.
Babe, because he looked and acted like a big kid.
Serious?
The nickname stuck, and for the rest of his life, hardly anyone ever called him George.
Bro, name is George. Okay. What in the... Yo, okay, yeah. See, this is why I need to watch this, bro, because I would never even know this.
Ruth may have been a kid, but he pitched like a seasoned pro. He won 14 games for the Orioles in half a season with the team before Dunn, beset by money trouble, sold Ruth's contract to the Boston Red Sox. He did this alongside another pitcher, Ernie Shaw. Babe Ruth was already on his way to the big leagues. Ruth didn't play very much for Boston in 1914. His breakthrough came the next year when he won 18 games and helped them win the American League Championship, known as a pennant, before defeating the Philadelphia Phillies in the World Series. In 1916, he was even better, with 23 wins and another World Series title, this time over the Brooklyn Dodgers. In 1917, they didn't win, but that wasn't his fault. He had 24 wins, bringing his total over 3 full seasons to 65, an average of over 20 a year. By the end of 1917, he was considered the best left-handed pitcher in baseball, and if he had continued on his way, he would surely have been remembered as one of the best pitchers.
So that's another thing too we just learned. Baby Ruth already could have been the best pitcher and hitter. Whole time, bruh. That's low-key insane. I'm not gonna lie to you. Wow.
In the history of the game. But Babe Ruth was a curious oddity in baseball, a pitcher that could also hit well. As rules, pitchers and hitters are like two different species of baseball players in the big leagues. Each discipline is so specialized that if you're good at one, you're not good at the other. Pitchers are generally so bad at hitting that in recent decades they've been replaced in the batting lineup with a designated hitter so that they can focus on throwing the ball. But those rules didn't apply to Babe Ruth. Oh no. He seemed to be just as good at hitting as he was at pitching. So good, in fact, that his manager decided to try him in other positions on days when he wasn't pitching so that he could keep his bat in the lineup. In 1918, when the Red Sox won a third championship, and in 1919, Ruth split his time between pitching and playing in the outfield and defied all baseball logic by being good at both. What made Ruth so unique as a hitter was how hard he could hit the ball. In those days, baseball was a game dominated by pitching and defense, while offense would be hard to come by. The home run, hitting the ball out of the park for an automatic score, was a rarity, with most hitters only managing a couple of them a season. But Babe Ruth, he had home runs, and he hit them in bunches. In 1919, he set a new major league record for home runs hit in a season when he cracked 29 of them, and the crowd absolutely loved him for it. At the end of the season, something happened that changed the course of baseball history. The Boston Red Sox were owned by Harry Frazee, a Broadway showrunner that had spent gobs of money on the team since he bought them in 1916 to make it one of the best in the league. But at the end of the 1919 season, he was in deep financial trouble, deeply in debt. He risked losing the ball club and financial ruin unless he could quickly raise cash. The only way to do this was to sell off the best assets he had, the contracts of his star players. Frazee was in a very public feud with American League president Ban Johnson at this point. So one of the only...
It's crazy because after watching, what is it called? Hockey. After watching hockey as well, you could tell that it really didn't even matter back in the day about the team, how good the team was. It was really about the owner. It was really about the owner. The whole, like, cause I'm thinking just like nothing else matters but the owner. That's what I was thinking. Nothing else matters, or not, but nothing else. Not the owner, but nothing else matters but the team. But if the owner is a bad owner, or if the owner got stuff going on behind the scenes that you don't even know about, now you walk into practice one day and they talking about, bro, you not on the scene no more. You like, huh? I'm not on the scene. I'm Baby Ruth. What are you talking about? Like, bro, they sold you last night. Sold me? Huh? Whole time, bro, a terrible money manager You know what I'm saying? Or he got dead. What do you say? What is happening?
Feud with American League president Ban Johnson at this point. So one of the only other owners willing to make a deal with him was Jacob Rupert, a co-owner of the New York Yankees. Rupert had made his fortune in the brewery business, but with prohibition bearing down on the country, he began to rely more and more on his baseball team for revenue, which meant he needed a star attraction to put his fans in the stands. The biggest box office draw in baseball at this point was Babe Ruth. So if Frazee was selling, Rupert was buying. Ruth was sold to the Yankees for $100,000 in cash plus a $250,000 loan. The news shocked the baseball world. Yankee fans were delighted, while Boston fans were devastated. The sale of Babe Ruth marked a dramatic reversal of fortune for both clubs. The Red Sox, which had won the World Series 4 times between 1912 and 1918, wouldn't win another until 2004, 86 years later. In that time, the Yankees, which at that point had yet to appear in the series, would win 26 championships and become one of the richest and most storied franchises in all of sports history. As the decades of futility piled up, Red Sox fans began to believe their team had been cursed, that they were all being punished for the mortal sin of sending Babe Ruth to the hated Yankees. There is a legitimate argument to be made that Babe Ruth saved baseball in the early 1920s. In 1920, during Ruth's first season with the Yankees, 8 members of the Chicago White Sox were banned from baseball for life after they were accused of taking money from gamblers to lose the 1919 World Series on purpose. The Black Sox scandal, as it became known, threatened the future of baseball, as nobody would pay to watch games if they believed the results were fixed. Babe Ruth and his prodigious hitting brought people back to the stadiums and kept interest in the game going as baseball weathered the storm. Something else happened in 1920 that Babe Ruth would indirectly benefit from, an on-field tragedy that would change the way the game was played. On August the 16th, 1920, Ruth watched from the field as his teammate Carl Mays pitched to Cleveland Indians hitter Ray Chapman. The ball got away from Mays and struck Chapman in the head, fracturing his skull and driving chips of bone into his brain. He took a few steps toward first base and then collapsed. Early the next morning, he died, the first and only on-field death of a player in Major League history. Witnesses said Chapman never even attempted to move out of the way of the fatal pitch, probably because he couldn't see the ball. In those days, players typically used the same baseball for the entire game, so in the later innings, it was dirty and hard for the batter to see. Pitchers also routinely applied foreign substances to the ball, like spit or tobacco juice, or scuffed the ball with their fingernails or an emery board, so it moved erratically, making it harder for the batter to follow.
You know what's crazy? I'm just give y'all a little backstory, because something like this happened to me too, bro. So, basically, I'll say probably this was when, what was this? This was, I was probably like 10. I was probably 10 or 11, right? I was outside, for practice, and it was very, very sunny that day. I mean, like, the sun was like right, like, especially if you're batting, the sun was in your face, like coming this way. So, obviously, if the sun is facing the pitcher or the sun is behind the pitcher, that means you can't see nothing the pitcher is throwing as well. So my job was, because it was practice. So I think my job was to just catch the ball. I forgot what I was doing. I think about it. I don't know if I was catching the ball or I was trying to hit the ball. But I remember it was practice and he was just throwing. No, I was catching the ball. That's what I was catching. I think I was just a catcher. Yeah, I was playing catcher, but I wasn't really playing catcher. I was just catching. I think I was just catching the ball and then I would throw it to first base and it would be like a whole little play. So he was just throwing. He was throwing the ball, and it was no stop either. So they just throw the ball like real fast, throw it, catch it, throw it, and then he'd throw another one, just like that. And I'm sitting here thinking like, dang, bro, I'm catching them right now, but I really can't see for real. Like I really can't see. And then what do you know, bro? Like 2 minutes later, he throw a ball. I couldn't see it. It hit me right here, bro. It hit me right here. Bro. It was so close to my eye. I don't know what could have happened, yo. I don't know what could have happened. But it hit me right in my cheekbone. You know what I'm saying? So I was, thankfully, thank God, I was okay. But I always think about that, like, bro, anything could have happened in that moment, bro. I don't know. If it would have hit my eye, I really don't know what would have happened, to be honest. I don't know what could have happened, bro. My face might look deformed or something, if you think about it. My shit could have all been placed in. I've been half flathead. Walk around flathead and shit. You know what I'm saying?
After Chapman was killed, baseball executives decided something had to be done and changed the rules, which persist to this day. Baseballs are removed at the first sign of wear, and players are forbidden from altering the ball or putting anything on it. The rule change had an immediate effect on the game. Offensive production exploded. Batting averages went up, more runs were being scored, and more home runs were being hit. No one epitomized this change more than Babe Ruth. When he came to the Yankees, he transitioned full-time into an outfielder. He would only pitch in 5 more games the remainder of his career. 1920 marked the start of the Babe Ruth era, as he began to dominate baseball in a way few other athletes ever have. He absolutely destroyed his own record, hitting 54 home runs. The next closest player had only 19. In 1921, he was even better. He set a new record, 59, and after only 3 full offensive seasons, he already had the most career home runs in Major League history. That year, he led the Yankees to their first pennant, losing to the New York Giants in the World Series. People packed the stands to watch Ruth hit wherever he went, smashing attendance records over and over again. After the 1921 season, Ruth signed a new contract that paid him $52,000 a year, an unheard of sum for a baseball player. It was more than some teams paid their entire roster. Despite this, he made even more money from endorsement deals and exhibition and vaudeville appearances than he did from his player contracts, the first athlete in history known to have done so. Crowds followed him wherever he went, clamoring for an autograph or to shake his hand. Ruth reveled in the attention, whether it be from a schoolboy or a newspaper reporter. Ruth was great copy for the papers, answering every question, even silly ones, and always willing to have his picture taken. They competed with each other to bestow the most outlandish nicknames on him. He was the Bambino, the Sultan of Swat, the Colossus of Clouds, the Maharaja of MASH, and a dozen others. By this point, Ruth was becoming as well known for his off-the-field exploits as his on-field production. His appetite for food was legendary. He loved to eat, and in massive portions. His weight would seesaw up and down a lot over the years. Alcohol was banned in the United States by this point, but those with money had no problem getting it if they wanted it, and Ruth put the good stuff away by the barrel. Well, let's just say that his stamina in that department, as well as the sheer number of women he disappeared into hotel rooms with over the years, was legendary among his teammates, even if it tended to be overlooked by the newspapers. In 1922, Ruth was suspended 5 times throughout the season for various offenses, after drawing the ire of everyone from his manager, Miller Huggins, to the newly anointed Commissioner of Baseball, Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis. He had thrown dirt in the face of an umpire, leapt into the stands to try and beat up a heckler, almost gotten himself killed in a car accident, and threatened to beat up another umpire. Losing for the 2nd year in a row to the Giants in the World Series was just the icing on the cake of a disappointing season. Ruth was lambasted by everyone, accused of setting a bad example to the children that looked up to him, and he promised reform. 1923 was the start of a new era in New York. The Yankees have been playing their home games in the Giants' home park, the Polo Grounds. And once the Babe arrived, the Yankees started drawing more fans to the park than the Giants did, which was embarrassing to the Giants' management. They told the Yankees their lease wouldn't be renewed and they would have to play elsewhere. Rupert bought land in the Bronx and started construction on a new ballpark, Yankee Stadium, that opened during the 1923 season. The dimensions of the new ballpark were specially designed with Babe Ruth's swing in mind, and it was only fitting that he christened it with a home run during the first game played there. Yankee Stadium would become known as the house that Ruth built, and it would serve as the Yankees' home stadium up until the end of the 2008 season, when it was demolished to make way for its replacement. The Yankees stormed to the pennant in 1923, again facing the Giants, and the third time proved to be the charm as they finally defeated their crosstown rivals to win their first championship. It was Ruth's 4th as a player. His popularity was as strong as ever, but his poor impulse control would rear its head again soon enough.
The Bellyache rig.
1925 was the low point for the Babe, both personally and professionally. During spring training, he became dangerously sick and had to have surgery to repair what his doctors called an intestinal abscess. The exact nature of his illness remains a mystery, but it seems likely it had something to do with his hard partying lifestyle. Sports writers jokingly claimed that Ruth had overindulged on hot dogs and soda pop, and
you know what's crazy too now I think about it, because he don't even look like, bro, honestly, bro, he looked like a plumber, bro. Let's be honest. Bro, like a middle school teacher. You know what I'm saying? Like, he don't really, he not built as like a real athletic person. You know what I mean? I mean, it's crazy to say. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I don't know, bro. I'm just being honest. Just being honest, bro. Then again, too, back then, I don't think nobody was really built, because it was like the first time this actually ever happened. So, you know, no one knew like what they needed to do. You know what I mean? So the league was infested with plumbers and middle school teachers. You know what I'm saying? That's just what it was. So
As nicknamed, sports writers jokingly claimed that Ruth had overindulged on hot dogs and soda pop, and nicknamed the illness the Bellyache heard around the world. Around this time, Ruth's marriage to his first wife, Helen, effectively came to an end. The two had married in 1914 during Babe's first season with the Red Sox, and like many teenage romances, it was destined for heartbreak. Helen grew increasingly distressed at her husband's inability to be faithful to her. It is believed that Dorothy, their daughter, was adopted, the child of one of Ruth's many mistresses. Finally, Helen had a nervous breakdown and spent much of the next few years in and out of the hospital. The two never lived together as husband and wife again, though because they were both Catholic, divorce was never considered. Ruth's erratic behaviour finally wore out the patience of Miller Huggins, who suspended him for over a week and fined him $5,000. Initially defiant, Ruth eventually apologised and practically begged to be allowed to play again. It was all part of a disastrous season for the Yankees, who finished next to last in the league standings. People began to say that the glory years were over, that the Yankees and Ruth were done. Both would set out to prove the critics wrong. The 1927 Yankees are considered to be one of the best teams in the history of baseball. Their lineup was known as Murderer's Row, with Babe Ruth the centerpiece of a truly fearsome offense. The Yankees won 110 games, winning the pennant by 19 games over second place, and barreled through the Pittsburgh Pirates in 4 straight to win the World Series. Ruth was in vintage form, breaking the single-season home run record for the 4th and final time with an even 60 home runs, and he was complemented by first baseman Lou Gehrig, one of the new generation of power hitters that had come to the big leagues inspired by the Babe. 1927 would prove to be the apex of Babe Ruth's legendary career, the summit of the mountain. From then on, it would be a slow descent back to sea level. Murderers Row won again in 1928, getting revenge on the St. Louis Cardinals, who had beaten them in the World Series in 1926. But then things started to go wrong. The Philadelphia Athletics rattled off 3 pennants in a row, resigning the Yankees to second place. In 1929, Miller Huggins, Babe Ruth's only manager while he was with the Yankees, died suddenly, leaving the Yankees leaderless. Ruth would spend the rest of his career campaigning to be named manager himself, to the growing frustration of Yankee executives. The Great Depression set in, hitting ticket sales and player salaries both. Meanwhile, Ruth was pulling down $80,000 a year, more than the President of the United States. When asked if he thought it was right...
When he said $80,000 a year was more than a president? Think about it back then. 89,000 was probably the equivalent to 10 M's. That's crazy. That's actually insane.
Pulling down $80,000 a year, more than the President of the United States. When asked if he thought it was right to make more money than the President, Ruth joked that I had a better year than he did. This meant that every time he got involved in controversy, he started drawing the ire of the fans. He was unable to dispel with good play anymore. Ruth had fallen victim to the universal enemy of the athlete, Father Time. As he got older, he physically declined, his offensive production nosediving. Ruth had one more moment in the sun. In 1932, the Yankees won the pennant again, facing off against the Chicago Cubs in the World Series. In the third game, in front of a hostile Chicago crowd, Ruth is said to have pointed to a spot in the center field and then hit a towering home run there, helping the Yankees to win the game and the series, the 7th championship between the Red Sox and the Yankees. Whether or not Ruth actually called his shot is a matter of debate among baseball fans and historians, but like many baseball stories, it almost doesn't matter if it's true or not. What matters is that it sounds good. After 2 more disappointing seasons, it became obvious to everyone that Babe Ruth was done as a player. He probably should have retired at the end of 1934, but he still wanted to manage. He accepted an offer from the owner of the Boston Braves, Judge Emil Fuchs, agreeing to an assistant manager/player position with a verbal agreement that he would be considered for a managerial job in the future. It didn't take long into the 1935 season for Babe to realize that he'd been tricked. The only reason Fuchs had signed him was as a publicity stunt to draw fans to his ailing ball club. He had no intention of ever making Babe Ruth a manager. What was worse, his performance in the field was embarrassing. He was a complete liability as a player now. After 28 games, Babe Ruth called it quits. He retired with 714 home runs, so many that he had twice as many as the next man on the career list, his former teammate Gehrig. Ruth went into retirement still hoping to become a manager, but except for a half season as a coach with Brooklyn, nobody was interested. He ended up doing what a lot of guys end up doing when they retire. He played a lot of golf. He had toned down his freewheeling ways in recent years, due in large part to his second wife, Claire. Ellen died in 1929. Claire kept a tight rein on his finances, travelled with him during the season to help keep him in line. Ruth's retirement was described as being like an ex-president's. He was famous but useless. One of the most significant things he did was appear as himself in the 1942 movie The Pride of the Yankees, starring Gary Cooper as Lou Gehrig, who had been...
Wait, don't he got a movie? I heard he got a movie as well.
...to retire in 1939 after being diagnosed with ALS, which claimed his life in 1941. Ruth made a number of public appearances designed to fundraise for the war effort or entertain the troops. He was so associated with America that Japanese soldiers were heard shouting what they perceived to be the ultimate insult to their enemies: "To hell with Babe Ruth." In 1947, Ruth began to feel sick. There was a terrific pain in his head and neck. Doctors found cancer growing in his nasal cavity and his larynx, probably caused by his near-constant cigar smoking throughout most of his adult life. Surgery couldn't get all of the tumor out, and it damaged his voice box to boot. The then experimental treatments of radiation therapy and chemotherapy were tried, but with only limited success, and it soon became clear that he was dying. In June 1948, he appeared at Yankee Stadium for the last time to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the 1923 season. He looked noticeably frail, using a baseball bat as a cane as he came out onto the field. 2 months later, he died, age 53.
53? And then you gotta think about it, back then too, the doctors was terrible as well. I mean, everything was the first thing. That's just kind of crazy. Everything was the first thing. Nothing like this ever happened before. You know what I mean? So the doctors was just not being doctors. So they was trying to learn how to be a doctor. Players was just trying to learn how to be players. Everybody was just going through life, breaking down barriers, bro. I mean...
The entire country mourned when Babe Ruth died. For 2 days, Ruth's body laid in state in the rotunda of Yankee Stadium, while a line of mourners filed past the casket. His funeral at St. Patrick's Cathedral was attended by 75,000 people, and another 100,000 lined the procession route to his final resting place at Gate of Heaven Cemetery. Most of Babe Ruth's records have been broken as the decades have passed, most notably his single-season home run record in 1961 and his career home run record in 1974. Today, he ranks third on the all-time list. The fact that he still ranks so highly on most of these lists a century after he played is a testament to how good he was as a player. The impact that Babe Ruth had on baseball can be seen in the way the game is still being played. Ever since owners discovered that fans love to watch home runs, they went out of their way to give the people what they wanted. More and more players came in that had home run swings. New ballparks were built to encourage more home runs, and in most modern stadiums, hitting a home run is cause for celebration with fireworks and sirens and exciting graphics popping up on the scoreboard. Babe Ruth changed the way that we think about things too. Someone who is a dominant chess player might be referred to as the Babe Ruth of chess, and most people will understand what you're talking about. Ruth appears almost cartoonish today with his goofy smile and grainy footage, often sped up, of him batting. It's hard to overstate how big he was in his day, though. He became the most famous man in America in an age when, if you wanted to see a baseball game, you had to go there in person, unless you wanted to read about it the next day in the newspaper. There was no television. Radio and movies were in their infancy, and more messages were being passed by telegram than telephone. And yet, still, everyone knew who he was, and they loved him for who he was, in spite of his faults. That kind of adulation seems silly in the cynical society we live in today, but that's just how it was back then. Perhaps the reason they loved him was because it was uncomplicated, with no ulterior motives or secret agenda. He was just a man who loved playing baseball. Sure, he loved other things too, but at his core, that's who he was. Just another baseball fan. The only difference was, Babe Ruth was one of the few people that baseball loved back just as fiercely.
Dang. Wow. That's crazy. I ain't gonna lie. I feel like, first of all, shout out to this dude, Biographic. This is an amazing video, bro. Shout out to him. Number two, I feel like I got a real good glimpse of who Babe Ruth is, bro. Because I literally never knew who this dude was. I'm not gonna lie to you. I never knew who he was. Bro name is George. That's tough.